Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and our non-binary babies, because there are some out there. Welcome to Live from the CRJ, the official podcast of the Dillard University Center for Racial Justice. I am your project assistant, Lawrence Weber, and and here with me in spirit is Miss Tia Suggs, who's the project coordinator. She's actually working on one of our many events this semester. But I actually have a guest with us today. And, sir, if you could, go ahead and introduce yourself with us.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Reginald Johnson, and I am the founder and executive director of Eura. It's a nonprofit. It's Eura. It's youthful offenders to reform and responsible adults.
All right. And first off, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Now, I remember you from last semester. You came to the university and you spoke to a number of our students who are criminal justice majors. If you could, go ahead and just give us a little bit of your story.
It started, it was in 1984. I was 15 years old. I was charged. I was arrested, charged, tried, convicted, and sentenced to spend the rest of my life in prison at age 15. So, because I was doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing, I was charged for a crime that I didn't commit. Being that I had no knowledge of the criminal justice system, because prior to that, I had only been arrested one time, but that was for trespassing, being in school that I wasn't attending. I was going to pick up my girlfriend at another school, but so I had no knowledge of the criminal justice system, so I really didn't know what was going on. My mother didn't know. All I had was my mother. So being that we had never experienced anything like that, we didn't know what was going on. But because we were poor, we didn't have the proper representation, and that's one of the biggest problems with our black, urban children that are being charged and tried as adults. They don't necessarily know what's going on, and most of the attorneys that they get, all they want to do is make a deal or whatever. So that's the thing. I spent 27 years and 8 months in prison before the Supreme Court ruled in 2010, Graham versus Florida, which basically stated that it was unconstitutional to sentence children 17 and under to life without parole for anything other than murder. That was before the Miller decision. Mm-hmm. The Miller decision came after that decision. So that's how I was able to get my freedom. Although I'm still not free because I'm still on parole, and I'm. Of
course. If you could, can you kind of tell us about the road to exoneration? Were you even at the time when you were incarcerated, did you have sort of, was it something that somebody came to you about, or was it something that you were actually following?
Well, actually, as long I've always been intelligent. All right, I was a very intelligent student, so I was fortunate, right? Even considering the circumstances I was in, I was fortunate enough to know that. So I studied a lot. I read a lot and I studied a lot. So, me always maintaining my innocence, I always felt that one day, I would come home. Hopefully, I would be exonerated. Unfortunately, I wasn't exonerated. All that decision did for me was my judge vacated my sentence, my life sentence, and sentenced me to the lesser offense. That's what the state, at least that's what the ruling required if you don't get actually exonerated, right? So I was sentenced to 50 years with credit for time served, being that, and when I got incarcerated in 1984, we wasn't doing 85% of our time, we was doing 50% of our time. So when I was resentenced, I was immediately released because I had been in prison 27 years, 8 months, which, on a 50-year sentence, you do half of it. So I was 2 years and 7 months overdue. So with being exonerated, I always, and right now today, I'm still fighting to be exonerated because I'm still, even though I may be physically free, emotionally, spiritually, and I'm still not free. Psychologically, I'm not free, right? Because there's places I can't go. I can't go out the country without checking in with my parole officer, right? So I'm still not free. So I'm still fighting for my exoneration. And, as I said, during that time, during that period, I didn't know anything about circumstance. I didn't know anything about the law or anything, me or my mother, because that's all it was, me and my mother. But, over time I learned because of me being incarcerated, I read a lot, right? So I matured a lot. And, so right now today I am still fighting to be exonerated. And it's a difference, and a lot of people don't really understand it. They figure that, you home, you free, right? But it's not that. I'm not, for a lot of things I'm not free to do, right? So psychologically, I'm still incarcerated, so.
Gotcha. And the thing of it is, and if you could, do you feel comfortable with talking to us about said sentence?
No, my life is an open book. I mean, I would want people to know my circumstances or the circumstances I was faced to try or to hope that other children won't
go down that same path. Yeah. So if you could, can you talk a little bit about your parole process? Because, and I think that you brought up something that is a very common misconception. If you're on parole, done, finished, finito caput, you go on about your life, and a lot of people don't realize that is not the case at all.
No, it's not. It's definitely not, because I consider myself somewhat fortunate because I had a solid foundation when I did, as far as family and friends to guide me in certain circumstances. So, and then I got a job as soon as I came home. So I was able to pay the fees that I have to pay every month. I was, and with a lot of other guys and a lot of other females that come home, they're not fortunate as fortunate, right? And with being on parole, it's I always say that you can't supervise a person to do good. I mean, to do right.
Of course.
So I've always had a problem with that, with being supervised, especially after you've served a sentence, right? So with me being on parole and a lot of other people, it's like you said, it's a misconception for a lot of people, because they truly believe that because you're free from behind the walls that you free. And in some circumstances, some people, not me, but some people that I know personally would rather be back in prison as opposed to what they're going through out here on the street, because they don't. The misconception about parole officers' job is to help you transition.
Exactly.
Not to put you back in jail, not to try to send you back to jail. But so many parole, and don't get me wrong, they have pretty good parole officers, right, that will try to help you. But for the most part, it's totally different. It's like, and there's so much pressure that a lot of men and women that come on from prison are faced with the parole situation. So
And a lot of times, now you made mention of fees that you essentially have to pay as a, I would say, condition of your parole. But I think that's another thing that a lot of people miss, because a lot of people think, okay, you're done, it's done. And like I said, you're done, it's finished, it's over. And that's not the case. There are fees that are to be paid. And unfortunately, with a lot of people who have been formerly incarcerated, they have issues getting gainful and worthy employment. Right. And as a part of that, seeing as though you have to actually pay to be free. Right. That's what I know, that has to lead to a lot of recidivism on their part, because if you can't pay, from what I'm understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if you can't pay, you run the risk of going back.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So I think a lot of people, those misconceptions, and even though, like I said, it is my personal wheelhouse, being somebody who works in like film and theater and whatnot, a lot of times there's that misconception, because you look on TV, oh, that person gets free, and oh, they can't get a job, and they don't realize, like, no, you've got to pay. Right. You have to pay. You have to literally pay to be free. Right. So I hope that for those who are listening, it's not an easy process. And I would hope that you would give folks who are essentially trying to turn their lives around some grace in that respect. Just because, I mean, it's a large process. Now, let's talk about this. 1984.
Yeah.
I don't giggle to make light. I giggle to kind of give people some sort of perspective. I was born in 1984. Okay. Right around Turo. Right. So like I said, a lot of people don't realize that is, well, now it is 40 years ago, which shook me to my core just now. So I'm getting old. It is what it is. I didn't even think of the alternative. But a lot of times people have a tendency to hear, I was convicted at this time, and don't realize just how long. So 27 years, that was around 2012 or 2013?
Yeah, I was released in 2011.
Okay.
2011.
Okay.
In October 2011.
Okay. So, like I said, at this point, can you talk a little bit about your kind of process in getting back into the real world? I'm using air quotations for those who can't obviously see it. Right. Over the course of, it will be like 13 years now.
Yeah. It's been difficult. It's been difficult, and the reason I say it's been difficult because I've had, as I mentioned, I was fortunate, right? I was fortunate to have that core behind me. I had a family, and everything, and it's still difficult. And then you got to understand, I was a child when I went to prison. So when a lot of people don't understand, and one of the reasons why I started my nonprofit is that reentry, right, or reintegration back into society is a difficult process, period, for anyone, right? Mm-hmm. That's been going a while, but it's exceptionally difficult for a child. that's coming home as an adult. Because you must understand that all that child's life, from the time that child, before that child was arrested or whatever, he was being cared for by his parents or whatever, right? So you go from being cared for by your parents to going to prison and being cared for by the state. Mm-hmm. So you got to keep in mind that child has never been responsible or had to be responsible.
Exactly.
So the challenge is for that child who's now a grown adult. Now, don't get me wrong. We grow, we mature with age and everything. But what people need to understand is that when you do get incarcerated, that time actually stops, right? And even though you age, you mature or whatever, you still really stuck in that age. So you still be in your childhood stage when you come home.
Exactly. And like I said, I mean, here on Dillard University's campus, we have a ton of 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds and over who I feel I'm an alumni of this university.
Okay.
And if this campus can talk, it would most likely say you'd messed up all over this campus.
Right.
And like I said, here was where, in my opinion, I learned how to essentially become an adult. I learned how to get up on my own and not have mom and dad get me up. I learned how to take care of myself. I learned how to pay bills and all of this. And with you saying that time literally stops.
Yeah.
And I mean from 1984 to 2011, keep in mind, again, I'm born in 1984. I've lived for the most part a whole life.
Right.
And I've learned, but to just have that kind of peace. And I got a chance earlier to talk to Mr. August Williams again with Bar None. And he told us how he was convicted in 1968.
That's right.
And to come back in, I believe, 2017, I can't wrap my head around that. I essentially cannot wrap my head around that because things changed so drastically from the 80s to the 2010s, not only in technology, but everything else. And you get this put on you. And I mean, it's jarring as a child going from high school to college, but it's got to be insanely jarring for you to go through that from coming out after 27 years. So I think I want to ask, what was the most difficult thing that you had to overcome when you first got home?
Paranoia. And that's strange that I say that, but I was paranoid. I was paranoid because I was afraid that they'll throw me back in jail, that my PO will throw me back in jail, that I'll do something, not necessarily commit no crime or anything, but anything, because I was always under the impression that when you're on parole, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't. So that's the paranoia. Even when I could have a daughter. I was fortunate enough to make a child before I went to prison. I was young. I was very young. She was 7 months. But when I come home, I had grandchildren. So when I come home, I spend a lot of time with them. So I would find myself looking at the clock, even though I wasn't on no curfew or anything. But I find myself looking at the clock when I be by my child's house, and wondering, should I be home right now? Let me get home before my PO come there and no, I don't be there. I'm going to get locked up. But that's the biggest thing. I was paranoid. I was paranoid of going back to prison. Not because I was going to commit another crime, because I knew I wasn't going to commit another crime. But it was just that and then I wasn't used to, even though you in prison, I wasn't used to being around a lot of people, right? In prison, you isolate yourself in certain circumstances. Even though you're in a dormitory, you don't have nobody close to you. Like, you have friends, you know what I mean? So, but when I come out here, it's crowds, and so I had to get back used to that. I had to get back used to people touching me, showing affection.
You see, gotcha.
So, and this why I say, with a child returning as an adult, this is one of the reasons why I established this nonprofit, because we go through psychological or mental health situations that people probably don't. We didn't have sociologists, child psychologists, neurologists, and everybody study our brain, study the child's brain, right? And they come to these different conclusions. But until you actually live that and know that we are suffering from mental health, and it's just the rarest things, the simplest thing that I can say this for, okay. When I was talking to the judge, when she asked me why she should let me go, right? And no, she didn't. I answered that question, but she asked me what would be the first thing I'd do when if she let me go. And everybody in the courtroom laughed at me when I said what I said, even the judge. Right, I said the first thing I do is take me a bath. I need to take a bath, about 2-hour bath, But everybody expected me to say something totally different, and I'm telling the judge, I said, Judge, I'm serious, dude. I mean, and people take for granted the smallest things in the world that's been taken away from you, especially as a kid. That's why I say it's a different reentry. Exactly. See, we have plenty of reentry programs, but they basically for adults that go to jail as adults, come home as older adults. But we need something specifically to cater. I mean, we could help in the process anybody, but we need to cater to children coming home as adults because they need that help. We don't. A lot of people in society don't understand the significance and the recidivism rate for children. Believe it or not, you look at August, for instance. I lost my mom when I was in prison. Like I said, I was fortunate enough to have family. I come home to a stable to guide me, right? But there's a lot of guys and women that come home as adults that don't have that, right? So they thrust back in society. They don't have a job. A lot of our young men and women don't, they're illiterate. They don't know how to read. So reading, reading is the key to everything, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So if they can't read, then how are they going to fill out the application? And right now, everything is technology. So if they can't read, they can't use a computer, right? So even if they can use a computer, they got to look at the captions. They got to know, where they're going at to apply for a job, right? So if they come home, they can't get a job. They need a place to stay. Right, if the people gone, you need a job because you need to pay bills, right? And then we not used to that. See, I found myself, that's why I say that we are still stuck in our childhood, even though we grew up, because I had instances, I used to work with my landlord. We used to work together. And there was times where I knew I had to pay the rent a day, right? Because we get paid the same day. And I would actually tell him, look, I'll pay you the extra $25 if I'll pay you the rent, next time we get paid. When being responsible, a responsible adult, I could have just paid that rent right then and there, not worry about having to pay the $25.
Exactly.
But I'm still in that child stage, right? So I'm not used to this. This is something I'm not used to. I'm not used to paying rent. I'm not used to paying bills. I've been cared for all my life, right? And that's why it's so important to have these organizations in place,
Exactly. So let's actually talk a little bit about your organization and what you're essentially trying to do.
I'm trying to decrease significantly recidivism, the recidivism rate, particularly for children that were arrested, charged, tried, and convicted, and went to prison as children and came home as adults, right? And what I want to do is involve our communities, because that's something I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about just particularly black children, right? Because we are disproportionately, if you look at who's being tried, charged, tried, convicted, and sentenced as adults, and we are not, contrary to popular demand, we are not the only people committing crime. And don't get me wrong, I'm not here to justify anyone committing a crime, right? I feel like, you commit a crime, you should be punished. However, there is a juvenile justice system in place for that. I don't feel children should be charged as adults. That's just my personal belief. But my organization, what we want to do is decrease recidivism, particularly amongst the children or who's now adults. And then you have some children that go and come out as still children. But for the most part, from research and from personal experience, I know how difficult it is in transitioning, right? From adult to child. I mean, from child to adult in society, right? So we are here to assist in that transition. That's what I essentially want to do. I want to assist in that transition and develop literacy programs for those who's illiterate, right? Because we want to do workshop training, we want to do job training, we want to do job interview etiquette, and these are the things that they're gonna need to be productive, not just be in society, but to be productive citizen in society. And I'm passionate about anything to do with children, particularly black children, but children in general, right? And especially children that's coming home from prison, or children that's adults that's coming home from prison. And I believe that my own organization could at least decrease some of the recidivism rate as far as that's concerned.
Absolutely. Now, I do want to. Can you talk a little bit about how your organization deals with mental health issues?
Well, the thing is that we have to do a lot of studies. We have to do a lot of studies, and we have to hire. See, that's where funding come in, right? Because we do have to hire professional psychologists. The thing is with me, I feel like I'm an expert in that field, right? Because I know psychologically, I know how it's been for me, right? And even when I was in prison, I talked to guys a lot, right? I was like a mentor to a lot of people, right? Because I grew up there. And the same thing they experienced, I'm experiencing the same thing. Because see, I'm not fully healed, right? But there's this taboo thing with, us black people in regards to mental health.
And the thing of it is, thankfully, we have started. Right. We're not completely there. I can tell you that right now.
Right.
Because there are still folk who are within our community who, when I say, "Oh, I'm going to therapy," it's like, "You going to therapy?"
Right.
What's wrong with you? And if there is something wrong with you, don't click out on me.
Right, don't click out on me. Right.
But I think we are better in a better place than we were years ago when people said, okay, I'm having an issue. I'm having anxiety. I'm depressed. I want to go and speak to a therapist. And with my generation, we're easier on saying, okay, I'm going to go speak to my therapist, and it's not met with,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
I had a stank face. So
right.
I keep on forgetting y'all are not able to see me on this thing. But I'm very, very glad that at this point we have started moving in the right direction, and especially with formerly incarcerated people, they do need. I mean, I feel like we all need like mental health services. It should be, as my personal belief, it should be as important as physical health. But again, people, especially in Black communities, people are still like, you're going because there's something wrong with you.
Right.
You're going because X, Y, and Z. But especially formerly incarcerated people, they have to adjust to a world, and especially with folks who went in as children and come out as adults, they have to adjust to a world that they quite literally have never been a part of.
Right.
That's like dropping somebody in the middle of a country that they don't know the language of, don't know the things. Like, okay, go ahead and live.
Right.
And that doesn't make sense. Right. So I am so glad to see that there are people who are doing their best to try and keep our youth, one, out of the system,
right,
but also for those who are making their way back, who unfortunately made their way into the system, are adjusting to become more productive members of our society. And I truly appreciate you coming to talk to me about this. And I appreciate that you are kind of spearheading that movement to, I hate to say broken people because there's no such thing. Right. People aren't broken. People have issues, but I never believe that people are broken. But I'm glad that you are there assisting with that process. Is there a place where they can learn more about your organization?
Yeah, through Bordenave. And also I have for people that would like to become members, I have membership applications. We haven't set up a web page yet, but we are in the process of doing that.
And like I said, the webpage is forthcoming, but we definitely can, we can definitely direct you to Bar-None. That's located at www.bar-none.net. That's again www.bar-none.net. Mr. Reginald, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
I really, and like I said, I remember the talk that we had last year, but I'm so glad that we got a chance to speak with you here, to not just a classroom, but to anybody who would listen all over the world, mind you.
Right.
So anybody that remembers us from our trip to Italy, I hope you've gotten attached and are listening over here. So we truly appreciate you. Thank you again. And of course, if you want to find out more from us, you can follow us on our social media pages. That is Instagram and Facebook. That's CRJ_DU. And if you would like to directly ask us any questions, go ahead and check us out at CRJ@Dillard.edu. That is CRJ, short for Center for Racial Justice, at Dillard.edu. Until next time, I am Lawrence Weber, the project assistant here at the Center for Racial Justice. We truly appreciate you for listening, and we hope you have a wonderful day.